Welcome to Legends of News with me, Dermot Manahan, the podcast that talks to the icons of broadcasting from the halcyon days of television news. You're going to hear fascinating anecdotes, insights and revelations about some of the most significant events and personalities of the last 40 years and probably a little bit more. My guest today has redefined television news not once, but at least twice in her career. First, as an anchor on News at 10, and then as a launch presenter of BBC Breakfast Time. She is, of course, Selina Scott, no less. Hi there, Selina. Yeah, we should have a drum roll, music, whatever, bands.
We should, definitely.
I mean, it is an unadulterated joy to have you here, Selina.
You.
I mean, we have got so much to discuss, you know, little bits and pieces that I've done over my career,
yes.
Appeared on programmes that you've appeared on, with a little less impact, may I say. But first of all...
That's not true.
It really is true.
And I mean, you followed in my footsteps, which I'm really pleased about. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, because I thought I haven't actually got to know you, even though I've watched you, and here you are. And I thought, right, well, I'm going to go along. Well, I'm going to walk through London to see Dermot.
I am really touched because, you know, I say icon, and I hate overusing that phrase, but you really, really are. But I want to know, first of all, how are you and what are you up to?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. And I'm doing a lot. I kind of flit around. I've got lots of things going on in my life. I haven't, in the word I've retired. I don't understand, people who retire. I've grown my hair long, as you can see. I haven't got a newswoman's hairstyle. You've got to have short.
Oh yes, the professional bob.
Yes, that's right. So you can see how long it's got.
It's fantastic.
Since I was last on the news. So yeah, I'm doing really well, and so are you, by the looks of things.
Yeah, and enjoying yourself quite clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a farm in Yorkshire, and I am. I don't like the word rewilding, but I'm restoring nature. I started off we had a bird count from the RSPB, and we had about 30 species of birds, and now we're up to 130 species of bird, with hedgerow planting and woods and ponds, and everything's going on there. So that's kept me totally occupied. Along with all my little projects, I get passions in life, which I kind of follow through on. So I'm busy.
So this is clearly one of the big ones. How many acres have you got in Yorkshire?
180 acres.
That's large.
In a most beautiful part of Yorkshire. When a friend of mine found the farm. I didn't go to see it. I just saw it on photographs. It was an ancient farmhouse. I had photographs taken of the inside, and I bought it without looking at it. Can you believe that? That's the kind of person, the mad kind of person I am.
So let's not be over specific about where it is, but what are you doing with it more than you said generally rewilding? Is there a grand design, a grand project, or is it?
Well, originally I rescued a few animals, a few goats, Angora goats, and I had to find a land for them because I'd birthed them out on various people and they'd got tired of them escaping and all the rest of it. And goats are really, adorable creatures actually, but they can be a nuisance. And so this is where the farm started off, that I had to find pasture land for the goats. And I went through that and, they lived their natural lives out on the farm. But, I'm having to deal with them and then when they end their lives, and it's awful when they become pets, basically. So I decided once the last one went that was it. I wasn't going to start looking after animals on my farm. And so that's when I started, I've got a wetland going at the moment. I'm dealing with contractors who've come in to put a sluice into the land to stop the water from escaping. And once the rains start, it's been the driest summer ever, but once the rains start, we'll fill a valley with water and hopefully attract overwintering birds from places like Siberia and everything else. So I'll be out with my binoculars tracking all of this. So this is one of the things that I'm doing at the moment.
Brilliant. It means we could have surely a series of Selina's Farm. We all know there is another high-profile television personality
exactly.
with their farm. But I mean, I'm quite serious. That would be fascinating. Have you ever thought of that, or don't you want the intrusion, or have you moved away from television?
Someone did suggest it some time ago, and I didn't have the big machines. Do you know what I mean?
It would be entirely different.
No, come on, boys like machines, don't they? They like big tractors, and
Well, I hope they like birds and ponds and hedgerows as well.
Well, I did think that that's what it would be. It would be, for example, I sensed that there was something eating the fish out of the pond, and I thought, well, I wonder what this is. Could it be an otter, or more likely a mink? And so I kind of followed the tracks, came face to face with the most beautiful otter that had just appeared out of a hole, with big long whiskers and all the rest of it. I mean, they're really destructive.
They're really shy though too, aren't they? So you're very lucky to see it.
But that kind of, I kept thinking then, well, people love this kind of thing, hares. All hares that run around, all the birds that arrive. It's a remarkable thing to be involved in. And once you're in it, you can't seem to kind of step back from it.
Okay, TV production companies, pay attention here. there is some rich pickings in Selina's farm. We do like to kind of get a vague sense of the trajectory of your career, which of course is still continuing. But can I do it by saying you're from Yorkshire originally, aren't you? Is this a kind of
my mother's from Yorkshire,
going home, right?
And my father's a Scot.
That's it, right.
My father's a Scot, so I have this dual personality.
Yeah,
and so that's why I'm in Yorkshire.
That's why when I was talking about it to a friend of mine, I said, well, Selina's from Scotland. I said, well, I thought she was from Yorkshire. But you started your journalistic career in Scotland, didn't you? Right, now we've got it cleared.
Mm-hmm. I went, I trained at DC Thomson's in Dundee.
School of Hard Knocks.
And then, I sat at a desk like this, and in front of me were row upon row upon row of men, all men, at desks. And at the front was like a teacher. He was the editor of the Sunday Post, as it was then. And I sat at the back because I was new. And everyone was quiet. It wasn't like a newsroom that you imagine a newsroom to be. That was so many years ago, Dermot.
We're not counting.
Oh, it was just too long ago.
But how did you get the job? I mean, is this young woman with all those men?
I was determined to be a journalist. I grew up in the 50s and 60s when women were expected to stay at home and have babies. Or if they didn't want to have babies, they could become secretaries maybe, or if they were very bright, very academic, lawyers or doctors, but very, very few. And I just was determined that I wasn't going to get stuck like that. So that's how, so I went to university, left university, came to London, did a shorthand and typing course, all with this drive that I had to know shorthand to be a journalist. And then I applied to DC Thomson's. I'd always wanted to go to DC Thomson's in Dundee. And that was where I ended up on Christmas Day, in a one-room tenement flat with a mouse in my bed for company.
Hold on, you started on Christmas Day? Well, that's...
They had Christmas Day off, but they worked Boxing Day. But I arrived on Christmas Day and I started work on Boxing Day.
Okay, so one of the most junior there, you start with the tough shifts, I'm guessing, right?
No, they were like that with everybody. DC Thomson's did not have holidays. And the Scots didn't really celebrate Christmas in those days. It was always New Year.
Always Hogmanay.
It was always Hogmanay.
And so, what lit the spark, though? That determination is quite extraordinary. That, yes, if you said in that era, learning typing and shorthand as a young woman, well, then you could easily become the typist you mentioned there. But it had to be journalism. Why? What lit that fire?
Funnily enough, I was thinking about this when you asked me to come and talk to you. And I thought, when I look back and I think of the drive I had to do this thing and to become like, and to plot my life in the way I have done. I thought, well, where did it come from? And I have absolutely no idea where it came from. I mean, it helped, I think, that at about 30, when I was 13, I discovered I could earn money. from journalism.
Yeah.
But I also love to write, and I love talking to people, and I love the idea of not being in one place and not being corralled. So it offered freedom as much as anything.
That's true, yeah. I mean, within certain constraints, though, particularly given then what you moved into, you talk about that freedom. But of course, when you move into television news, and it's certainly, they're big engines that you did. I mean, there are huge constraints upon you. And also because, you were this young woman in an era when it was 99% men appearing on people's screens, and you just must have been under so much pressure.
Mm-hmm. When you're young, you don't register the pressure. You don't think about. When I look back and think of me sitting there with Alistair Burnett, and the legendary Di Edward-Jones,
the director, yes,
and I was in this small newsroom with the doors with Mike Nicholson. Doors with the offices of these foreign correspondents. Mike Nicholson was one of them. John Snow, another. And off they'd go to these far-flung places. Peter Sissons. All these men who were powerful men, powerful correspondents, talented men. And there I was, a complete newbie. But they were all, without a doubt, supportive of me.
Brilliant to hear. I mean, because they're all, later on I worked and met those people, and I was terrified, and also had that experience. But of course, I'm a different gender. With those reputations.
But
I was a lot. Well, I would have been, I think 31 when I joined ITN, and just in the dying days of Alistair Burnett's era there. But he was lovely to me. He brought me into his office. I was the absolute junior of juniors, and he kind of came in early to do news at 10. I was doing the breakfast shift, so obviously we were ships that passed in the night, and he came in early to offer me a drink at 11 a.m. I remember, in his office. And when I say a drink, it wasn't H2O. It maybe had a little bit of it in it, but I was trembling. I could hardly speak. I mean, you were, 20, and you were in your 20s when you joined.
I was in my 20s, but I never got the drink. He never gave me a whiskey. He never did.
How did you feel, though, that first day?
I was just wide-eyed, soaking it all in.
But confident. I mean, this is what I'm getting from you already. You knew you could do it. You didn't have any doubts.
Yeah, because I've been in Grampian Television.
Yeah. Tell me about that then, the grounding, the move then from DC Thomson and the writing more to television news presenting.
I had a very bad skiing accident and had to go into hospital for 6 weeks. I'd been up Glen Shee with a boy who shouldn't have taken me to the top of the mountain and pushed me down it. So I had a bad accident and ended up in hospital. And at the end of it, I just felt it's time to try something slightly tangential. So off I went to the Isle of Bute as a publicist. Now, the Isle of Bute is down the Clyde. It used to be Rothesay and the Isle of Bute. It used to be a big tourist destination. But at that stage, it was full of young oil workers who were based at Ardine Point, which was just across the water from Rothesay, and they used to come over and have a whale of a time on Rothesay, and then so I loved being on Rothesay, and I loved the Highlands and Islands. I was the publicist for this place, and I stayed there for about 18 months. And then there was an ad I saw in the paper for a reporter, Grampian Television. The
old ITV franchise.
Yeah, exactly. And most northerly television station. So, and the oil industry, of course, was in full swing in Scotland then. So it wasn't just, I mean, I fell in love with Scotland. The most beautiful country and the most wonderful people. I mean, there was no messing with the people there. There was nothing like it was in London, where everyone was, she's on television. I was the lassie from the Grampian. And they'd stop me in the street and talk to me as though, just run into me. And went to Orkney, Shetland, Western Isles, all over the place. It was heaven in many ways. And I recall that this was the time when we moved from film to tape. Film was, as you know, cutting segments laboriously, and tape was instant, and you could do it anywhere. And I was sent up to the most northerly oil rig, which was north of Shetland in a Force 9 gale, to do the first broadcast on tape for Britain. And it was that I think attracted the attention of David Nicholas at ITN. Wonderful Welshman, talented and, full of verve. And anyway, he then sent Alistair and Diana Edward-Jones to Aberdeen to meet me on a snowy night in a hotel in the Grampian area. And they offered me the job of News at 10. So I did come from a background where I'd had experience of television and live television. But I had to learn. I had to obviously know how to cope with going out to a nation.
But I mean, what a leap! I mean, you've gone from, as you say, the Lassie from Grampian, one of the smallest regional franchises, certainly the most northerly one, to at that stage, News at 10, the top of the Premier League of news. What a leap! How did you feel? It was madness on one level for a long time, but it was quite rigorous. It was very rigorous going into News at 10 at night, and of course we had the Falklands War that happened when in my time there. So I was absorbing all this, brilliant professionalism. I remember Alistair Burnett refused to read out, and you will know this, Dermot, how easy it is you want to tell the nation what's happening and give them the news first. But you've also got to temper it with, is it right? Is it true? Are the facts there? Am I spouting something which is not true? Am I going to get into trouble for this later? And of course, News at 10 didn't have satellites at that stage, so we couldn't get instant feed. It was all through Reuters or through the wire services. So I learned a lot from Alistair Burnett, particularly at the sinking of the Galahad, when we heard it went down. And we heard it first, but we didn't want to release the information because we knew that all the servicemen and women their relatives would be listening because we only had the BBC News and ITV. We were almost the guardian of the public conscience at that stage. So, you had to keep yourself tight and focused. So yes, it was fascinating, actually. Huge responsibility, but on very, very young shoulders. But you just accepted it because of your burning desire to do that.
Yes, and a bit of background, a little bit of
obviously as well. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking. I mean, I'm looking at you, and you've done exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing.
But not in that position you were in. This kind of this. You were this revelation. I mean, it was broadcast news generally because of the nature of delivery and the fact that there were only a few channels. Was you had millions, you had tens of millions on occasion, particularly during the Falklands War, of viewers. You're working with these legends, people like Alistair Burnett, who'd already been there for 25 years.
Well, that's the truth, actually. I mean, you think of legends. I think that's what I think of,
proper.
Legends.
I mean, but God rest his soul. If only, I mean, yes, we have Alistair on in a heartbeat. Yes,
Sandy Gore, who's just died. Alistair, who died, some years ago. Diana Edward-Jones is gone. I feel like the last man standing in many ways,
Reggie Bosanquet, of course. Did you work with Reggie?
I missed him. I missed him. Leonard Parking I worked with. Martin Lewis, of course, was there when I was there. So there was, all these people I remember so fondly now when I look back.
And how did you deal with that impact of being one of the first women on News at 10? Wasn't Anna Ford?
Anna Ford was the first
just
one.
Before you, yeah. But how did you deal with that? And particularly during the Falklands War, I remember it. There were, excuse me saying it, Selina, but, they would say, the forces are going to far-flung areas to put themselves into danger. And they said, well, Selina was something of a pin-up for us.
Yeah, I had a photograph taken. And the next thing I know is that all these little postcards arrived and I had to sign hundreds of them. And I said, what are these for? Well, we're going to drop them. Drop them in the Falklands Island. This was a David Nicholas wheeze. It was his.
He was a
idea.
Genius. Yeah,
he was a genius. Welshman. Who was devoted to news. And who had a flair, of course.
So what was the idea? Sorry, dropping postcards of Selina
I don't know
Scott.
how on earth they're going to get it done to the South Atlantic. But, all these young foreign correspondents, they were young then, being sent off around the world. They were told to bring back the news first, of course. So, they were based in Chile. And as I said earlier, there were no satellites then to get the news back quickly. So all these kind of escapades of boats being stolen in the middle of the night and people just, as I say, dropping these leaflets. Don't know how they got the leaflets or photographs to the men in the South Atlantic, but it wasn't overwhelming, but it was all very exciting.
God, I'd love to get my hands on one of those leaflets. I wonder if they're any still around.
I look very sultry in them. I've still got a few tucked away somewhere.
Well, bring one in next time you're on Legends of News, because we've got so much to talk about. We're never going to cover this in one episode, that's for sure. But of course, it was also, there were also parallels because of Charles and Diana getting married in 1981. Did you cover the royal wedding as well?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and there were comparisons, weren't there, between Selina and Princess Diana?
Yes, there were. But I kind of... She had a sense of humour. She said to me once, everyone compares me to you and say we look alike. I said, yeah, I know, but I came first. I was the one that came first.
Did you really say that?
And
Good
so
for you.
I mean, she laughed because I don't know. We had a similar build, and of course the fashion of the day was for hair and shoulder pads and all of that in the 80s. It was so yes, she was. She came to ITN to look round ITN. Michael Shea, he was a Scottish press officer for the palace, decided that she needed to have some idea of what was happening behind the scenes rather than just being forever in the news. So he brought her when she was a few months pregnant with William to ITN, and she was introduced to everyone, and she was very young. And I remember we got into the lift. She and I got into the lift to go up to the 5th floor, and all the men, there's David Nicholas and Alistair Burnett, who had been escorting her around, were left outside, and she closed the door. And the first thing she said to me was, "Tell me who your boyfriend is. Which one of them is your boyfriend?" I said, "Well, you must be joking." I said, "Have you seen them?" By the time I got to the 5th floor, she was going to tell me what Anwar Sadat had said to her in the recent state visit she'd made to Egypt. But the doors opened just as she was about to tell me, and there they all were again. They'd run up the stairs to meet the lift.
Out of breath.
So, yes, so that was the end of that conversation. But she was look at her. I mean, she had such a baptism, didn't she, of fire coming into the royal family, and everything that was going on. The attention that she had was colossal.
I think still unprecedented in the scale of it, wasn't it, over those, brief time. She was married in 81 and lost to us in 1997. It's only 16 years.
Yes, do you know, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Did you stay in touch with her? Did she, particularly when it came to press intrusion, did she ever compare notes with you or ask you for advice?
Yeah, we did. We did whenever, we met. She was very natural. There was no ceremony at all. She was struggling. And it was, Michael Shea was the one that was trying to be the go-between. He asked me if I would mentor her, but I felt that I just felt I was doing too much. I was immersed in it, and she had her own, life, which she was immersed in that, and it was the crossover would have been extremely difficult. I mean, you know what it's like. If you've got to talk to someone, you've got to do an interview with someone, you can't be friends. You can't be friends like that with them. Mm. And so I kept my distance to a degree. And of course, she had a life which absorbed her, and she went in that direction. But of course, everything was very intertwined. The palace and the news and the photographers. It was enmeshed, really. So it was just a difficult time all round.
But I also guess as an impartial journalist, to your bones, you couldn't take sides because then, as now in different ways, we talk about the palace, but there are several royal palaces and they have different press operations, different agendas. And certainly when it came to Charles and Diana, we subsequently found out there was a lot of briefing one side against the other. And, I mean, you couldn't take sides, could you? Because you also had to have a relationship with the then Prince of Wales.
That's right. No, you couldn't. And I'm surprised really that in a way I kind of managed it, but I didn't. I didn't try to, take sides. I didn't. I was asked to do interviews, and I did my interviews, and that was it really.
How often have you interviewed Charles?
I interviewed him for CBS. I'd put in a request to interview him, and he ended up in the Amazon, I remember, with a group of tribesmen, and he was talking about, of course, at those days, he was very...
Probably never happier. I mean, to be in the Amazon with some tribespeople.
But there's no one there. There was no press there. There was no... so it made the effort to get into the Amazon. No one turned up. So he remembered that I'd said, CBS would like to do something with you. And I was called, and I did the interview. I went and did the interview with him, and he was sparky about the environment. I remember it was all, and that went out coast to coast in America. So that was the first one. Then it was the one on Burnley. He came to Burnley with me. That's the little island off the west coast of Scotland. Yes. And then there was another one. What was the other one? I did 2 for CBS, that was it, and I did 1 for ITV.
And what was your judgment, if you made one, of the character of the now king?
He was very natural. He was, when you saw him with the Islanders, it showed a completely different side to him. You hear a lot about how spoiled he is and how the toothpaste is put on his toothbrush by whoever, but he lived with a couple of crofters, Gloria and Splash McKillop, on the island of Burnley, and he was upstairs in the attic, and he ate with them. And I remember sitting down for dinner with him and Splash and Gloria, and we had mutton and potatoes, and I'm not a big fan of meat. And I'd kind of struggled. And we got to the end of the meal, and he'd finished. And he said, "Are you going to leave that?" And I said, "Yes, I can't eat any more." So he said, "I'll have it." So he got and he spurt with his fork and lifted the potato and put it straight in his mouth, and then grabbed the mutton and kind of put it on his plate. And I thought, well, I wasn't brought up with bad manners like that. And here is, the Prince of Wales behaving, like this. So that was quite an eye-opener. But he was very natural with everyone, very moved by, I remember the throat music, the voice of singers in the church on a Sunday, and that was very moving too.
Tell me about the other groundbreaking move you made in career terms. So, and they're fairly close together because there you are at News at 10.
They were close together.
And then, I mean, talking about the Falklands War, so it's almost exactly a year later, you have moved to the BBC and are about to launch on a breakfast programme, and the whole debate before it is, well, surely it's very un-British to watch television in the mornings. We only listen to the radio, and serious people only listen to the Today programme.
Isn't it funny?
What is all this
how
about?
You remember all of this.
Yeah.
Very few people would remember the zeitgeist at the time.
Yeah,
and that
I
was
was just a weirdo, obsessed with news and trying to get into it.
How old were you then?
No, I was in my 20s by then. I left university and was, like you, determined to become a journalist, and like so many people listening and watching this, thinking, well, how the heck do I do it? Well, I think I thought I better watch some stuff and listen to some stuff.
Why were you determined to become a journalist?
I was a historian, and I just thought, I don't want to become an academic. I started studying for a PhD, and after a few months I thought, golly, this is so boring. Well, boring in the sense that, you're sitting around reading about these momentous events and hopefully discovering new things about them, but nobody's ever going to read your blooming PhD, and as it turned out 40 years later, you do have the front row seat at the making of history. I mean, and also you get paid, and it's much more fun to do, and you hang around with some quite nice people, some not so nice, but we won't talk about those.
In you about the money, do you think?
No, I firmly believe, you should get paid if you work hard. If you don't work hard, then, fair play to you. Let's see what happens to you. But I just, it was a revelation. I mean, 1983. So the nation is expecting 2 breakfast programs, because TVAM over on ITV, there's been a huge bidding war for the franchises, and they assemble this then superstar team, with Anna Ford, David Frost, etc., Angela Rippon. And the BBC thinks we can't be left out, but doesn't have the firepower, the personalities, and they put you and Frank Bough, mainly a sports presenter then, but I mean, beyond able in terms of his ability to deal with live television and ad-libbing and all that. And they put you two together and get on the air first. I mean, what was that like? Just tell me about, the preamble as all that was going on, all the press coverage, what's it going to be like, how will Selina get on with Frank, etc.
Yes, it was actually pretty horrendous, Dermot, actually. And I look back at that and I'm not happy about it. I don't feel comfortable. I feel, this is a big move. This is a big risk in career terms, because if it had failed, that would have been the end, because I was still very young, and the BBC was not a great fit for me in many ways. ITN was, I felt part of, something remarkable. I mean, David Nicholas sent me off to Florida for the space shuttle, and then he sent me off to the morning shows to learn about American television, and so I had this kind of shot in the arm, this American television, and the energy, the verve that comes into all of that. So I came back from that, and Ron Neal, who was a Scottish producer, a very talented man, and able to see what British public really wanted at that time in the morning, came to me and said, this is the next frontier. Would you like to join? And so I did. But from day one, the newspapers were, in a way that they weren't before, onto every little thing.
And were the criticisms about, the kind of fripperies, but of course they're not about your hair, your clothes, or about your presentation, about
it was everything.
Questioning? It
was absolutely everything. It didn't matter what it was. And it went on for the whole time I was in breakfast television. So I couldn't have a normal life. I couldn't see friends. I couldn't do things that I wanted to do, because all the time, if I came out of a nightclub or I came out of a restaurant, they'd be there. The photographers would be there, and I just thought, no, I'm a journalist. I'm a professional. I'm not here as a plaything. Remember, I'd come from a very protective atmosphere at ITN. And then before that, very laid back atmosphere in Scotland. It was the two totally different things to this. And so I thought, right, well, there's only so long I can do this, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to move on. In the middle of it all, Alistair Burnett contacted me and said, would I go back to ITN? And I was on the verge, on the cusp of saying, yes, I would do that. But then I thought, no, you can't go back. There's no chance of going back. You've got to keep going forward.
Very similar. I mean, we discussed the parallels at the same time as Diana, but that, everywhere you go, there's somebody around the corner waiting with
at pine trees. At pine trees. And I was on holiday, looked out, and there was a long-range lens, and on a pine tree. I thought, what is that thing flashing? And the light was catching the lens. And that was it. Yes, it was just never ending.
It's just extraordinary. And the other fascinating thing, as we subsequently found out, was working with Frank Bough. Frank Bough. Who knew? I mean, I said as a viewer, I was watching there thinking, well, there's Uncle Frank, and I like the way he presents sport and whatever. And presumably after the show, he goes home for a shower and a bit of a nap. How wrong we were. Did you know anything? I mean, they're well documented. They're a matter of record now.
Yes.
That Frank had a very interesting life, particularly after the programme. Weren't you all knackered? How did he go out and
now that I am this age, and now I can look back, I can see why he did these things. Because he was in his 50s, which at that stage, it was old. I sat next to him and thought, here's an old geezer who's, got these horrible polyester jumpers and his little pot belly that sat there. And, he had a lovely personality on screen. He came across really well, and he was, as you said, the master of the ad lib. And it never, at the beginning, never crossed my mind that he would be feeling insecure in some way. In a male kind of way, going through that period in his life when he was surrounded by all these young people, and he wanted to feel energetic and part of it, and still a player, sexually as much as professionally. It seems to me. Now I look back.
Yeah, he could have just gone and bought himself a Harley Davidson, couldn't he, or something like that? But the cocaine and hookers or whatever it was. I mean, okay,
But it was Russell Brand that came to me and said, "You realise what Frank is up to?" When he goes off I said, "What's he up to?" And then he told me. I said, "Oh, for goodness' sake, Russell, that's scurrilous gossip. You shouldn't be saying things like that. Frank is Frank. Uncle Frank."
Exactly.
And then, of course, it
came out.
And then we had, an exposure by the News of the World. And that was it, really.
What was he like to work with, though? I mean, you talked about your experience at ITN with, again, old men, but welcoming men, super experienced, in terms of their CV and their abilities and their hours on air. Frank, okay, coming from not a news background, but similar flying hours, if I can put it that way. What was he like with you? What was that relationship like?
I've had experience before of older men that I've worked with who have felt threatened. And who have, it's really strange. It's really weird how even, men you think are secure and talented and it's not younger men, actually. It's always older men. And I was always paired with older men. And I was...
that was kind of the American thing, wasn't it? That was the template,
I suppose it was. I suppose it was. But there is this... It's not just competition. It's something else, which I could go on and on about.
Well, just a little flavour of it, because I've seen males doing it to younger women when they're paired up with them. I mean, I hope to goodness that I've never unconsciously done it myself. I certainly never would have done consciously when I've been working in a TV terms a double act. How did it manifest itself? Did he, because I've seen it, did he cut across you, contradict you, demand to do the big interviews behind the scenes, stitch you up in effect, all that.
All of that. And so, you saw this kind of partnership on air, but you were on for 3 hours. And it started off at 3 hours. Live television. You've got the audience to deal with. You can't be, fiddling around with this angst that's going on, cutting across you, stopping your interviews when you should be stopping it. You're in control of your interview. You've got to say, thank you, really nice to speak to you, and instead you have this kind of wham, extra question just when they're counting you out, 10, 9, got to finish this, Selina, 8, 7. And Frank is busy asking them one final question, which is going to go on for another 30 seconds. So then I was left, sitting there, shut up, Frank.
Well, listen, you covered it up really well.
It's a bit like Punch and Judy, you feel as though you should get a thing hit him on the head.
But, you covered it up so well because it became, you saw off before they even started TVAM and, they made their own mess themselves. You were preeminent in that space. And partly because, it was that relationship between you and Frank, as I say, it didn't come across at all that, there was... And I got it, here's the slightly, TV intellectual bit. I got it, and I've read some stuff subsequently about what it was, how breakfast television in the UK took off was, and what breakfast time then got supremely right, and some coming afterwards haven't, was you came across to a nation at home, bit bleary, having their breakfast, getting ready for schoolwork, whatever it is. You came across as a family, as, kind of messy and dysfunctional and varied as the families watching, because, there was, we've said, maybe Uncle Frank, maybe Daddy Frank or whatever, Selina, the big sister, whatever, the
Russell Grant,
the nice idea, Russell Grant, yes, the crazy,
the Green Goddess,
and your mad aunt, Mad Lizzie. Oh no, that was the other.
Yes,
yes. But on it went, and then there's slightly Nick Ross, the serious brother or something like that. But it's very much a kind of family unit, and that was
thanks to the producer. Yeah. You weren't there when Ron Neal was producing. No, he'd come from Scotland and knew that people, it was out there. When we covered Ian Botham's march from John O'Groats to Land's End, and we did it live. Yeah. We were there every step of the way.
Groundbreaking.
Absolutely. And he raised tons of money for children's leukemia. But it was getting out of the studio. It was, as you say, relating to people, and so he was brilliant in that sense. I think the BBC all the time felt that they shouldn't be going so down market. So then they became serious, and that's when Dermot Murnaghan came on board.
Yeah, so I ruined it. Yeah, I was a bit later.
No, but you were later.
Well, instead of breakfast time, it became breakfast news, and then just breakfast.
Exactly.
And they thought they should serious it up, and then the audience all went to the other side.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So the BBC got cold feet halfway through it all, and felt that they should, be a bit more intellectual.
But you must have had. With all that going on, there's that stuff behind the scenes, but there must have been some incredibly fun moments as well. And people love it when things go wrong. And boy, did they go wrong. But boy, did you handle them well.
Well, they were always going wrong. And it was live. Once you've done live television, it becomes very difficult to speak to anyone, your closest, your nearest and dearest. If they don't spill the beans within 3 minutes flat, you don't want to know after 3 minutes. You get used to this 3-minute thing. This is the interview that's got to last 3 minutes, and after that, people really can't take much more. Got to keep moving on. Yeah. I remember Sting came on, and he was going on about Gormenghast, and of course, no one knew what this book was all about.
Mervyn Peake.
I had no idea, and I was told, wind him up, and of course he was a hunk then, was Sting. He was quite a catch. So that was a very difficult thing to do. I think I left it to Nick Ross in the end to wind Sting up and get him to talk about something else.
Did you have any laugh out loud moments? I mean, for me, on breakfast was Bill Oddie in a milking parlour, which was slightly raised up to talk about, obviously farming and environmentalism. It was raised up. The cows had their backs to him live. So, Bill, I can't remember, how do we get environmentally friendly milk or something? Cue cow, lift tail, and peed all over him. I still laughed. And somebody said in my ear, well, there's a new definition of the golden shower. That's it. I couldn't. Bill did very well with it. Kept talking.
Yes. Well, yes, you've got to keep talking. Yeah. You can't.
But anything like that for you?
I suppose there must have been. Right now, it's all just somehow just a kaleidoscope that it moves and moves and moves.
Well, also because your brains are slightly mashed by getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I guess.
Yes, that's the other thing. Now I don't mind getting up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning, but then it was such an effort. Well, it was such an effort. And I'm pleased I left when I did, because I do think that it doesn't do you any good to get up at that. I know that there are people, who... How many years did you do?
Well, in different iterations. I did 5 years on breakfast, and I did a Channel 4 breakfast show for about 4 years. So I got about 10 years of it under my belt.
I think it does something to your brain, really, getting up at that time in the morning.
Well, permanent jet lag, that kind of feeling, isn't it?
Yes.
But none of us can complain for those opportunities. But you then got away from it, didn't you? You just got away from news. You got away. You stayed at the BBC. Was it straight to the clothes show, or what happened?
Yeah, I decided to go because I felt now is the time to move. I've always tried to be a step ahead, tried to get away from everything before I felt that it was coming to its natural end for me. And I decided to go. And everyone was so surprised that I'd decided to pack it in and go. I hadn't anywhere to go to. I hadn't got any kind of insurance policy or anything like that. I just decided to finish. And I remember I was driving through France, and I was heading to the south of France for a holiday when Michael Grade rang me, head of the BBC, controller of the BBC, to say, just come out of this press conference, and everybody wanted to know what was happening with me. Was I on a big salary still? And he had to find me something to do because he couldn't carry on like this. I said, "Oh well, I'll think about it, Michael. I'll get back to you." "No, you can't get back to me. We've got to decide now what it is you'd like to do." So he came up with the idea of the Clothes Show, which was a new programme coming out of Birmingham with Jeff Banks.
Yeah.
And he said, "Would you like to do this clothes show?" I said, "Well, I'll let you know when I get back. I'm not, at the moment, I love clothes. I've really even now I love clothes." But I said, "I'll think about it." And in the meantime, someone from the Wogan show had contacted me to say, would I go on Wogan and stand in for Wogan when he was away? Which I said, "Oh yeah, I'll do that. That's okay. That's live television, and I fancy doing that." So that was agreed. So the two kind of came together. I came back to Britain. I did the Wogan show. An American producer from CBS, two American producers who were in London, saw the interviews that I was doing and offered me a job on West 57th, which was this current affairs show going out of New York, coast to coast. At the same time, I was offered the clothes show. So I thought, I really fancy doing the clothes and Versace and all of that, Armani and Chanel, and going around the country with all these kids getting dressed up. I mean, it was just glorious. So I did both together, and I flew back and forth to do both together at the same time. And then, it just went on. I mean, that's how life went, with me. It was from West 57th. I came back and I launched, it was BSB, and then I launched Sky News. And then I did the Selina Scott show for CBS again, out of ITN. It just all became all round and round and round.
Well, nice things, but terribly draining, I'm guessing, particularly the transatlantic links.
Yes, but that was the day of Concorde. So if I turned up early, a bit like David Frost. David Frost was doing the same thing. If you turned up early and you were booked on I always flew first class, thanks to CBS. If I turned up early, I could get upgraded to Concorde. So, that was terrific.
3 hours.
Terrific.
There you are. No jet lag.
Terrific. Yeah, terrific. And of course, with CBS, I was doing some amazing interviews with people like Garry Kasparov, the chess champion at the time. He was doing something in Bilbao, came to me, knocked on the door, said, if you want to do an interview, we can run round Bilbao at this time. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning with the camera crew and a light, and you can talk to me as this is Garry Kasparov, he was being a chess champion. This is the kind of stuff you had to deal with. So off I went with him to do the interview. Going to Africa to expose the ivory trade, the mass killing of elephant when it hadn't been uncovered before. Working with George Adamson, all of this just before he was killed by the poachers. All of that was extremely challenging. In fact, that was one of the, I think, highlights of my career, that I managed to, that interview, that documentary, which went out over an hour, coast to coast, changed the law on ivory poaching.
Changed policies in many countries.
Yeah, they stopped the CITES, the international body, stopped the sale of ivory 2 months after the programme was shown, and it saved the lives of hundreds of elephants. It started again, but at that stage it was. It was that was the power of television, of course.
Yeah.
That's the pull, isn't it? When you're on television, and that the strength of the medium, the strength, reaching out to so many people, millions of people. It is an aphrodisiac beyond belief, isn't it?
So that means the most to you in terms of all you've achieved in television, because there was a change in policy and a demonstrable effect.
Yeah, I think so, because everything else, interviewing George Harrison was fun. This is all for CBS. Interviewing Prince Charles was for CBS on these important issues was important. There was a lot of important interviews and showbiz interviews and one thing and another. But when you see, I have a thing about animals. I can't. I find the cruelty that people, have towards certain animals just unfathomable, Dermot.
Yeah. Tell me, you mentioned those big interviews in the United States, and of course, one that's much mentioned these days for obvious reasons. And we're speaking on the day that President Trump is making his unprecedented second state visit.
Yes.
Who knows, might even be a third at some point. You interviewed him famously in the mid-90s when he was the big businessman from New York. Impressions?
When it appeared, he went ballistic. And that was the first indication I had of how men particularly, when faced with a bully, give up. The ITV men who ran the show had the rights to show the movie that I did twice. It had the first airing in Britain, and it was going to have a second airing in America. And all of them were wanting it. But because Donald Trump came out and said he would sue the pants off ITV crumbled. And then they said, well, he could have right of reply to me. This is after the right of reply. So he came over to TVAM, or whatever it was called, Good Morning Britain,
right,
and sat on the opposite sofa and tore me to shreds. But here he is again. As you say, right now, here I am sitting with you while he is busy hobnobbing with King Charles and Queen Camilla.
I was going to say, I take it, I'm wondering about the guest list for the state dinner, the second state dinner for President Trump. I take it you're not on that list.
No, I'm not on that list, thank God.
Listen, Selina, we're overrunning massive. It's just so fascinating. We've got so much more to talk about, which means I'm booking you in instantly. For whenever you want to come back and talk more with us about your career and, news in general. But I think the key takeaway from this is, I promised everyone, didn't I, anecdotes and revelations. The revelation that Prince Charles, as then was King Charles, who's dining rather more royally tonight, pinched Selina's leftovers.
Yes, that's it.
And we should look forward to Selina's farm. That's the other pitch we're going to make. We must, when this ends, we must sit down and write out the proposal for that. Selina Scott, absolute pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dermot.